All right, away we go on a Monday podcast. The boys have left the studio, so here we are. What's up, Al?
Oh, hi there, Jerry. I like to get back to people if they reach out to me on
Absolutely.
social media.
Sure.
Most people they'll DM me on Twitter or on Instagram. But I just found over the weekend, I didn't realize that on Facebook, if someone messages you on Facebook and you're not friends with them, it gets buried into some spam folder
Oh,
that's
really?
like way deep.
Yeah.
I found like a year's worth of,
Messages.
yeah, some of them were very
You
nice people.
heal.
I tried to respond to the ones that needed
The
responding.
only thing about that, though, that I do think makes you come off a little bit better, I think they can see if you saw it or not.
Oh, okay.
So I think they will see that it was unread.
Oh, okay. That makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
And some of it's just like, hey, what song was that you just played? And it's like, June of 2024. I'm like, huh.
The Goo Goo
I'm
Dolls.
not sure about that one. Yeah, then somebody else sent me. Actually, this popped up. Someone sent this to me, and it popped up on my YouTube feed. David Lee Roth performed for the first time in 5 years.
How about that? I saw that too.
I will say the band sounded very good.
How'd he sound?
He sounds like he always sounds, which is like he and this was even in his when he reunited with Van Halen. He like kind of talks the lyrics, which I don't like.
Got it. Maybe he can't sing anymore.
Yeah, maybe. But by the way, he looked great.
And he's what? Late 60s, early 70s?
Oh, definitely got to be in his 70s.
70s?
Yeah. He looked terrific. He was wearing all leather. The guy looks in great shape. Good
I
for
just
him.
saw David Lee Roth his age is he just turned 70.
Oh, okay.
So you nailed it.
Yeah,
There
he
you
looked
go.
great.
I just saw on YouTube, it was, I don't know, it was last month, I want to say. I forget. I don't know where this is, but it was a news piece on a man who's 99 years old and still goes to the gym. You ready for this? Lifts
Yeah.
weights for 3 hours a day. He's 99.
Yeah, that seems like a lot.
All with it. This will be you. He's all with it upstairs. He's in phenomenal shape. And he says because he started lifting weights in his 50s, that he clearly has preserved his body and lengthened his lifespan.
Nice.
He looks great. And he sounds great.
That's awesome.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
So maybe David Lee Roth will be singing until he's 99.
Yes, he will be. So you had sent me a video, Jerry, last week about
Ramit Sethi.
Yeah, I wrote this down. Who it came from? The video.
I will teach you to be rich.
Yes,
whatever it's called.
That's his YouTube channel.
Yep.
I will teach you to be rich. You say his name is what?
Ramit Sethi, I believe is.
It was you asked me to watch this. It's the classic argument of, are you better off renting a place or buying a place?
Yeah, and now to be clear, this guy, what he does, I don't know if you looked at his page at all.
I looked at some of it afterwards.
I actually love it. I came across this on, I think there was a piece done on Netflix about him, which is where I learned of him. This is where I learned of him. And then I'm always got a YouTube page. So I started following him or subscribing, and I've seen a lot of his stuff. And what he does basically is if you have financial issues within your marriage, basically, or a relationship, whatever, you kind of send him all your stuff and he goes over it with you and they kind of work out a plan. And some of the stuff is pretty straightforward. Some is very difficult. Sometimes he seems like a marriage counselor as much as he is a financial counselor. And I find it very interesting because you see a lot of wild stories out there.
Yeah. Well, they say finances is a big,
and politics.
Politics and finances, big problems in relationships.
For sure.
Yeah. So he was trying to use a, when you look at what he ended up with in doing the calculations, it looked very much like renting is the way to go.
Correct.
But it requires the renter to
have discipline
and to invest a lot of money.
100%.
And here's where I think it runs into trouble. So he tried to use a real life example. He picked a house that was like $2 million in
California. Yeah.
And if you were to purchase that house, your mortgage is going to be $10,000 a month, right? Using round numbers.
Right.
And if you rent that condo instead, it was like $5,000 a month. So that's a difference of $5,000 a month for 1 year. That's $60,000 and all this stuff. And you don't need the down payment.
Right. And it was a very real example. It just doesn't work for here, I don't think.
Well, here's where I think he ran into trouble, which was he said, okay, so I think that example works if you have $10,000 to make that purchase. Let's say if you have the money to buy that thing for $2 million,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of buying it for $2 million at a $10,000 a month mortgage, you rent it from somebody instead at $5,000, then you would have an additional $5,000 that you're not paying
Right, to invest.
that you can invest.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's not how people do their housing.
Well, that's and that's the issue with the example that he gave.
Yeah.
Like for me, I would say where I live in Monmouth County, much of the mortgages and the rents are kind of even,
They're kind of
actually.
even. Yeah.
So that's why I didn't love that example. I do like a lot of what he says, but the one thing about renting, and me and you have talked about this all the time, the difference between renting and buying is the market. That's everything. Because if you rent for 20 years, um, you don't pay for repairs. You don't pay for a new air conditioner. You don't pay for a new roof. You don't pay for a new hot water heater. Like for me, last year I had a pool collapse in the backyard that needed to be taken out. The ground had to be redone. Patio went in. Deck had to be closed up and fixed. And it was an expense of $16,000 that I did not see coming. If I rent that house, the owner's going to do that, not me. So a lot of the renting versus buying thing works if you have especially if you have a very stale or slow growing market. When you have a market explosion like we've just had, you want to be buying, and you've experienced this both ways in the last 10 years.
Yeah. I had the place in Basking Ridge that I was there 9 years. I did upgrades and I sold it for less than I bought it for, which was shocking.
Had you rented, you would have made more money and probably invested more money.
Right.
Now
Versus now where I've made money.
Right.
But I also thought too, I've spent the last couple years paying like double my mortgage
Mm-hmm.
because I want to pay my house off.
Oh, okay.
But if I would have taken that money instead of paying double my mortgage
And invested it.
yeah, I'd probably be in much better shape.
That's probably true.
And I could have taken a lump sum and paid.
That's true too.
But they always say to be like, oh, you have to have a diverse portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm already doing 401k, I figured, well, let me pay down my mortgage.
I don't think what you did is bad.
Yeah.
Do I think you might have more money had you done the investing
Yeah,
instead and just continued to pay your mortgage? Probably. But you've also built in a lot more equity in your house too at the same time as well.
Yeah, I mean, either one is good. I'm sure I would have made more money had I put it in the stock market.
Maybe, but I don't think it's that stark of a difference. I don't.
Yeah.
I really don't. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think in a lot of ways, a lot of this stuff evens itself out.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a matter of how you get there.
Right. Yeah. So it was interesting too, because he did use a real life example. He used a really cool tool that is on the New York Times website, which you can punch in different things, how long you plan to stay somewhere, down payment, all this stuff. But
I think I'm sure not everyone's going to agree with him, just like everyone doesn't agree with Dave Ramsey or all these guys. He's become my favorite though.
Yeah.
I like the way he thinks. I like when people have to give their monthly budget and their spending plan. And when people will send in that we spent, $1,200 on groceries, he's like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, it's excessive. And he sees what people are spending for. And when he sees low numbers, he'll be like, that's not right. You're spending more. You're not being honest. He seems to really have an idea of what the common folk, what their expenses are every month. And I also think he's in California, which helps because he understands the higher prices.
Right.
He's not coming to us from Iowa, where things are a lot cheaper than New York and California. So I do like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I took from that example was if you're going to rent, you need to have a couple $1,000s a month that you're investing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Otherwise, you're wasting money.
And when people are buying, all that money's tied up in the house.
Correct.
Right. So if you're somebody who has $8,000 a month and you either have an $8,000 mortgage or a $4,000 rent bill, you better be doing something with that other $4,000
and not just spending it.
Right.
Right. Now, the one thing about the whole renting and investing thing is, I mean, it's been about 100. Yes, the market can tank, but over 100 years, it always comes back. And on average, it is essentially an 8 to 10% return as you go through the years. The housing market goes up too. The problem with that is, like the stock market, is it can collapse, but you may not be able to wait it out. Whereas usually with your money in the stock market, you can wait it out unless you're hitting retirement age.
Yeah.
You could be in a house where all of a sudden you can't pay the mortgage. Like, you got to get out. And if you're at the wrong time, you don't make that money. You end up like you did in Basking Ridge. You end up selling your condo for a loss, comparatively speaking, to when you bought it.
But here's what I always thought about that. So, like, let's say you have a $2,000 mortgage.
Okay.
And you're in that home for 10 years,
mm-hmm.
and you sell it. And you sell it for the exact price you paid for it.
Right.
So that $2,000 you sent the bank every month came back to you, no?
Well, most of it's interest.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, especially the first 10 years. You really start paying off principal.
What he showed was like the first 15 years.
It might be before it starts going the other way. I mean, before you really start hitting the principal. That's where I've always said, like, and I know banks are in the business of making money too, and I understand that. But it is insane when you look at specifically mortgages, or any loans for the most part, though, how it's just like, here, you're going to pay us a fortune before we, like, you ever think if you run into trouble, and let's say it's a mortgage, for instance, and 12 years in, you actually look at how much money you've given the bank. You've paid for the house already.
Yeah.
But then if you can't make that payment, well, you owe us $200,000 still, so get out. But I kind of paid you back already. Don't work that way. It is ridiculous, the amount of interest when you think about it.
I also think it's funny. You'll hear some financial people, and they'll be like, your 30-year mortgage, the first 15 years you're going to, but if you just pay your mortgage one extra time a year, you'll save 25 years. Like, what are you talking about?
You save 8 years. On,
right now.
Well,
how is that possible?
So that, right. If you pay every other week instead of once a month,
okay,
you're making 2 additional payments throughout the course of the year, where you're making 26 payments instead of, how does it work? So you're making 26 payments instead of basically 24. So those extra 2 payments.
Well, you should be only making 1 mortgage payment a month. You'd make 12 a year.
But the theory being,
oh, and I see what you're saying. So if your mortgage is $2,000 a month, you're paying $1,000
every paycheck,
right, twice a month.
Correct. If you just pay it every 2 weeks rather than looking at the due date, and you keep paying it ahead, at the end of the year, you will have made 2 extra $1,000 payments that goes purely to principal. So $2,000 at the end of the year has come off your balance. So if you do that for 23 years, every time you're taking more principal off, the interest comes down. And that's where I believe all kidding aside, I think you save 7 years if you do that.
Yeah.
You know who did that? Was Mike Mancuso. Do you remember that name?
I know the name, yeah.
He was like a reporter. I used to hang out with him at the Net games, the Garden sometimes. I remember when he first got his mortgage way back in like 1999. He said, yeah, me and my wife were doing this every 2-week thing. He goes, I'm going to be out of my house and I'm going to own my house in 23 years. I was like, what? And then I bought my house. The banker set up the same thing with us. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, it just doesn't sound, sometimes it sounds like it's impossible, or they'll just be like, hey, just make 1 more payment a year and you'll save 19 years off
this
your
will be
mortgage.
paid off by next November.
Yeah, how is that possible?
I know.
Yeah.
It is funny.
The other, I listened to a Theo Vaughn podcast.
Mm-hmm.
This was from a couple months ago. I re-listened to some of it. He had on this guy, I can't think of the guy's, Gabor is his name. He's like some sort of professor, philosopher, and things like this. But they were talking about how your childhood could affect what you do for a living.
Okay.
So the examples he gave, I wrote them down. The example he gave is like somebody becoming a doctor because they want to feel important. And maybe they didn't feel important as a kid. And Theo Vaughn said, he became a comedian, he believes, because he didn't feel seen as a kid. His mom, his dad was like 70 years old when he was born. And then his mom was very busy with stuff and wasn't affectionate and all those things. So he said he didn't feel seen. And maybe that's why he became a comedian. But all the examples they were given, I couldn't help but think that if you had a nice childhood where you were treated great by your parents, you're screwed.
Yeah, right. You're destined to do nothing because you're satisfied.
Right.
Yeah, I don't.
It was really weird to
I
listen
mean,
to.
I had a very, very nice upbringing. My
Yeah.
parents were great. We had no issues in our home. Very middle class family. Um, but I guess technically I'd be an example of that too, because growing up, I used to announce games with my friends in front of the TV, and I couldn't wait to get paid for that. I don't know that my childhood got me prepared for it, but that was something we did. I don't know. That's an interesting one.
Because Gina said that to me. She goes, "Oh, you must have picked radio for a reason. You didn't feel heard as a child. Now everyone must listen to you." I said, "I don't
No,
know.
I doesn't. From what you've told me, it doesn't seem like that's the type of house you grew up in.
No, yeah, and I don't feel that way." But then you could also say, like, I believe, well, you don't know that. That might be subconsciously you didn't feel
I guess.
seen or
I mean,
heard. Or
I think experience too holds a lot of influence over what you do and become because it's what you know. Like, the fact that my son's going to college to do, sports media and stuff. If I was a banker, he might not be doing that. But then again, my dad had nothing to do with this business, and this is what I chose. So, I mean, who knows? I will, you know what? I will tell you one thing. Again, influence and experience. I saw my dad put a suit on every day, leave the house at 7:30, and sometimes I get home till 7 o'clock at night. And I do remember telling my mom very young, I don't do that.
yeah,
I won't put a suit on. I went to why with you bring your kid to work day. I did that many times, and it wasn't like I didn't think his job wasn't cool, but I just remember him sitting there in the. He had a big office, had a great job. It's like, why you just sit there and you're taking phone calls and you're writing stuff down. Like, to me, it was boring.
yeah,
It just didn't interest me. So I guess, yeah, I guess our childhood does influence what we do.
yeah. I remember thinking, like, why not try to have a fun job? And
Yes.
if it doesn't work out, get a regular job.
Yeah, you can always have a fallback of a regular job. That is
Yeah.
very true.
Like, I remember thinking, like, "Wow, you gotta work till you're, like, 65." Let's say I can't figure this out for 10 years. That's still a long
For
time that
sure.
I'd have to work
That is true.
a job if I didn't like it.
Very true.
Yeah. But I don't know, like, that it means that I didn't feel heard to be. But
I'm sure for some people that is true, but I would say for the vast majority, that is not the case.
yeah.
I really do think here's a good example. So, Mulaney Tire in Matawan, you used to pass it all the time. So that's Mike and Joe are Mr. Mulaney's kids. He has since passed away recently, unfortunately, but he was a business owner. He ran his tire shop and shop. And so Joe wound up taking it over. Mike went in a different direction, but had the stones and the know-how to start his own business. He's a physical therapist, opened up his own facility. Those are two guys right there that their father's influence really kind of shaped their path in a way. Joe took over for him, and Mike. A lot of people won't just start their own practice; they'd go get a job. He didn't. He just right from the start. I'm going to start after he finished school and his internship. He started his own practice because he knew what it was like to be a business owner.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of truth in what they're saying. I don't think, but not for everybody.
Yeah, just anytime you listen to any of these psychologists, psychiatrist guys, there is so much that they claim gets imprinted in you, like, before you even go to school, like,
Mm,
when you're a baby, 1, 2, that plays out your life. It seems like so much is determined in that time where you can't even remember that part of your
it's
life.
very possible. I wouldn't know. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
possible. I can only talk for myself from what I do remember and the direction I went in. You know, my sister did not grow up around divorced parents, and yet she got divorced. A lot of people say that happens. You'll see it from generation to generation. What led to that? I don't know. Certainly wasn't being in a bad house. My parents got along very well.
Yeah.
My brother opted not to get married and have kids. Get my parents married, 3 kids. So we're all 3 of us are so incredibly different. I went to college and finished, had a pretty good idea of what I was going to do. My brother tried college, hated it, and has done very well without it. And my sister started but wasn't into it and wound up having a family. She did end up getting a divorce. Now she's pretty happy with what she's doing in her life. But you talk about 3 kids from the same parents in the same house.
What age difference between the 3 kids?
6 years between me and my sister and 2 between me and my brother. She's 6 years older than me. But, I mean, you wanna talk about one way, another way, and a third
Yeah.
way. Nothing is similar to what the 3 of us have done.
Yeah. That's why it's hard to sometimes think, like, how important those early things are in your life.
Sure.
It's also weird, like, the things they also say the memories your earliest memories, like, why do you still remember only a couple little things?
Yeah.
Like, what about those things makes you remember that?
What would you say your earliest memory is?
I can remember I have 2 early memories. I remember my older sister's 3 years older than me.
Okay.
I remember her going to school and me looking out the window when she was going to school. And then I remember playing with like a toy motorcycle on the couch, waiting for my mother was at the hospital waiting for my sister to be born.
Hmm.
So those 2 things. But
How old would you say you are? Like, when you say
so I had to be I was probably 3 when
okay.
my sister went to school, and then I was probably 4 when my other sister was born.
Okay.
But nothing else stands out about that other than I remember being there at that moment. But
Would it be
there's
wild
nothing.
if that was all unlocked?
Yeah.
Like, if one day you could remember, I'm not saying when you were a baby, but let's say the time you started talking and walking. So maybe between 12 months and 18 months old, all of a sudden, like, those parts of your life became crystal clear and you could see and envision what it was again.
Yeah.
Because I really don't remember much from when I was little.
What do you think what could you recall as your first memory when someone says, "What's your first memory?" Do you have anything that comes to mind?
Not, I mean, not, I remember being at my grandmother's house, you know. I remember I'm in preschool. I remember falling down the stairs, leaning on a door, and it was open, and right down the stairs I tumbled. I remember that. I remember being in the hospital, getting my tonsils out, but that was like when I was 7. We're not talking 3 or 4. But nothing like we were in Brooklyn, I think, till I was 4. I have 0 recollection of that.
Yeah.
None. Nothing. So not much. Really not till I'm 7 or 8 do I really remember. And I remember, I've always told you that I remember sitting down and watching the Cowboys and 49ers with my family. I remember that like it was yesterday. And
And you
then,
would have been how old then?
that was it. I was 7. That I remember. And then the next spring, going out to California to see my family out there, where they were outside of San Francisco, and everything was 49ers, 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 and it was wild. I remember that. But yeah, I don't prior to 7, it's like a memory here, a memory. That's it. I don't remember much. I really don't.
Yeah.
I remember getting our dog. You know, it's funny. I remember getting our dog, and she was. I had so that's probably when we first moved into that house. We moved to Jersey, so maybe I was 5, and we had her until she died when I was 17. So we had it for like 12 years,
Wow.
13 years. I remember when my mom brought her home. So that might be my earliest memory. I don't
Or
know.
falling down those stairs.
And falling down the stairs was around the same age, around
Yeah.
5-ish. And maybe as I talk about it, maybe more would come out, but no, I don't on the spot. I don't remember much.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah, and I wonder why we remember like, falling down the stairs, that would make sense why you remember that. Getting a dog that you had for 12 years, that makes
Yes.
sense that you remember that.
Yeah, I do remember that.
But just other random odd things
Yeah,
that just pop into your mind that and then other things in that whole time frame around that, no
I
memories.
know. It's almost as if it didn't happen, especially in that time where we didn't have phones and cameras and everything lives digitally.
Yeah.
Like my parents had, you know, like a lot of people with a basement, they had a flood in one of their homes in Marlboro, and she lost all her photos. It's like none of it really exists anymore except in your mind if you remember it. And I don't.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, you would have pictures of your birthday and Christmas.
Yes. But at least you would have that.
Yeah, you would have that.
And you know what? She used to have a lot of random vacation. Like she had tons
vacation.
of California pictures because we went. I remember starting to go in '82. Maybe it was even earlier than that, but we went every year for like 7 or 8 years to see them. The amount of California photos we had, and Florida. We went to Florida every year for vacation. She had tons of vacation photos, Christmas and birthdays.
Yeah.
That was it. I don't think she got any of them anymore.
What are your early memories, people? What significance do they hold, if any? Makes you think.
I'm sure some. Yes, you can think about it.
All right, Jerry, let's do the warm-up show. I have a memory that we did that at 5 a.m. this morning.
Was that today?
That was today.
Oh.
And we will do it again tomorrow.
CeeLo tomorrow?
No, CeeLo Friday.
What?
Friday, you're hosting. Boomer's out Friday. You're hosting.
I am?
Mm-hmm. You on the schedule. Hostess with the mostest.
All right, then.
CeeLo's in here.
I honestly had no idea.
Yeah, Boomer out Friday.
Oh, all right,
he actually even referenced it during one of the segments.
Okay.
Today.
Good to know.
Gio didn't know either, but Gio looked up to me and says, "Is Jerry in?" I said, "Yes, Jerry will be in."
How about that?
And CeeLo, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll see you then, Jerry. Tomorrow, though, your warm-up show material.
Yes.
So